Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Bryce, do I need to start again?
Yes, take it from the top, Tom.
Okay. Morning, everybody. Sorry for those of you who had to listen to this earlier, but welcome to our California PGA chat. This is a series of chats that we do twice weekly to bring forth information to you, the most critical information, especially regarding COVID-19 and any governmental aspects of our lives at this point. This is a joint call with the Northern California PGA section, as well as the PGA of America. And we encourage you there to ask as many questions from our speakers that you might have. There's a chat box that you'll see on the right-hand side for you to ask questions. There should be one in there now welcoming you and asking you to use the chat box, and we'll respond as soon as we can. And again, we encourage you. The speakers that we'll have this morning, we're pleased to have the Secretary of the PGA of America, John Linder, our Chief Membership Officer, John Easterbrook, Tony Rice, who's our consultant and lobbyist in Sacramento, who hasn't checked in yet, but he will, Craig Kessler, who's been a stalwart on these calls, as well as Kevin Fitzgerald from the Southern California Golf Association. And through this, we'll attempt to provide you with up-to-date information as we can. And joining us as well as the Executive Director of the Northern California section, Len Dumas. Hi, Len.
Hi, Tom. Good morning. And good morning, everyone. And not only our state of California members and associates, but to our partners. And thank you, John Linder, John Easterbrook, and Craig, Kevin, and Tony for joining us on the panel this morning. You know, between our two sections, we represent almost 10% of the membership of the PGA of America. So I think that reflects the power. And Tom, thank you for, putting us together here, and to both our teams for making all this happen. This is particularly important because of the passing of the stimulus package, which happened on Friday. So everybody worked over the weekend to create as much content as we could this morning, and we do expect to do more chats this week as more organizations, including ourselves, have an opportunity to digest the information and to some extent make more sense about it, and that way our responses will be more pointed. As Tom mentioned, please keep checking our websites. We're continually updating with links and current information that work with us and to us and for us, both on a personal and a professional level. So let's get started. We've got a lot to cover this morning, and let's start off with the Southern California president, Tony Latendre. Tony?
Glenn, thank you very much. And I'll be brief because I know there's a lot more information that people will be sharing that's more pertinent than what I have to say. But I would like to just everybody on the call first, on behalf of the Southern California PGA, thank you for being on the call. And those of you in Northern California, thank you for making this a joy. I think this is our states together in this fight against COVID-19 and sticking up and supporting all of our golf professionals. The one thing I would like to just been said before, and it'll be said multiple times on this call this morning, is that we encourage you to participate each time you can. I understand you can't maybe make all the calls, but twice weekly we're trying to do these. Please share your ideas, share what you're doing at your clubs, ask lots of questions. This is that outlet. And sometimes it's just talking it through that lets us know that we're all supported and in this together. One of the directives that the presidents of the association, all of the sections have received from President Whaley, is to reach out to your fellow PGA members and pick 5 or 10 of your closest friends and just reach out to them, share some ideas, see how they're doing, be an ear, be a shoulder to lean on, whatever it is, and encourage those golf professionals to do the same. And I think by the end of this, if nothing else, all 29,000 of us nationwide will be closer and closer. I know I've done it in our section. I've even had golf professionals reach out to me. So hopefully you'll start that web as she has asked. I think it's a great directive. And I think that if we pull together, all of us together, we can certainly get through this and we'll all be better on the other side. So thanks for the opportunity to say something. John, everybody that's on the call, Tony, Craig, thanks for joining us and taking out your time to be supportive for our section. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Tony. And just a reminder again, if you weren't on, we are taking questions. If you look on the right-hand side in the webinar box, and you can open it with the arrow on the top, open or close, by the way, that there is a chat box down towards the bottom that we'd like to remind you to use for your questions. And we'll monitor that box and that chat and make sure you list to the appropriate person a question that you might have. Again, there's been a lot of changes. As you know, the stay-at-home order was extended to April 30th. Congress passed the stimulus bill. There's still a lot of questions in that regard, and hopefully we'll have some answers to that as the week goes on. This time we'd like to start with the Secretary of the PGA of America, John Linder. John, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your schedule to call in and participate in this. Kudos to everybody in Northern Cal and Southern Cal for putting this together. There are a lot of other sections that are following suit and trying to conduct as many of these calls as possible. I'll let you know, John Eastbrook and I will kind of tag team this because John's got a lot of up-to-date information, but just kind of some highlights of what's going on from PGA HQ perspective. First and foremost, the staff is just working their tails off on your behalf, and it's important that you note that. They've gone through some challenging times. Obviously, for those of you that don't know, earlier in the month of March, we shut down the 100 building, which we own, and moved everybody into the 300 building, which we lease, condensed staff into the 300 building, asked them to work in cramped quarters, and then all of a sudden get hit with COVID-19, and now they're all working remotely. And they're doing a tremendous job. The one nuance about working remotely is they're constantly at their office and they're constantly working. John and Steph and the team have done a tremendous job. Obviously, one of the things that we have dealt with currently is we've postponed the Club Professional Championship, or better known, the PPC, that was scheduled to be in Austin in April. We've obviously postponed the PGA Championship, which you're all very closely tied to and aware of. And obviously the KitchenAid Senior PGA Championship is on that brink as well. So we've got some major championships coming up that we're trying to work hard on, trying to figure out where they land in the scheduling with the tour. Staff is working with the tour very closely as to trying to carve out a niche as to where we're going to land and what that looks like. Obviously, one of the other topics that has hit the airwaves most recently has been the dues. And so just to give you all a little insight, all 41 executive directors were sent out a survey regarding dues. Keep in mind that the majority of your dues that you get are section dues. And a lot of the sections, if we postpone dues, would be struggling. We're keenly aware of that. And one of the things that we did from an HQ perspective is we moved up half of the ADP funding from June to the first week of April to assist many of those sections who really were going to be negatively impacted by the financial crisis that we have and losing of sponsors. So we've moved up ADP funding, the first half of ADP funding from June to April. The dues rollout is not necessarily complete. We're still researching it, and John Easterbrook may have some update to that. But the initial rollout that hit most recently was that the section dues could be paid for by July 31st without any late fees. National dues, which amounted to about $162, could be paid as of October 31 without any late fees and or penalties. And we understand that there are people that have a financial crisis. Obviously, the stimulus package is going to help. We are still working around the clock on trying to make that more affordable and better ways to have people be able to maintain their membership and keep their dues during these struggling times. So there's going to be more news brought on that, hopefully by the end of the week. The other things that have transpired, obviously drive, chip, and putt, that has been postponed or canceled more or less until 2021. All those participants that qualified in 2019 for the 2020 drive, chip, and putt at Augusta National will participate in April of 2021. A few other things that we've done nationally is we recognize the fact that this was going to put a crunch on MSRs, not only from a meeting perspective, but from a tournament participation perspective. So the MSR cycle has been extended 1 year. So it will run one additional year to 2022. We've also allowed for those associates which are in the queue or in the program, we've extended their acceptable progress from 8 years to 9 years, knowing that their lives would be impacted by this as well. And then lastly, those that are just getting into the program in their qualifying phase, normally they have 6 months once they purchase their books to pass the qualifying test. That has been extended to 9 months. So a lot going on from a PGA of America standpoint, I will say. So Susie, Jim, and I, along with Seth, we have calls twice a week, do a debriefing. We're constantly texting, calling. We're sitting in as many of the section calls as possible, as many district calls as possible. I was on with District 8 earlier this morning, around 8 o'clock this morning, as they talked through some of the situations that they're dealing with. And as you hear Craig talk about, this is a very fluid situation. So communication is key. It's so fluid that I'll give you an update from my end. As of 5 o'clock on Friday, the facility where I'm at, the Country Club of Lansing, which is a dicey facility as the mayor of Lansing lives across the street from our entrance, and the governor of Michigan drives by the facility as her mansion's about 200 yards from the entrance to the club. So when those mandates come down from Michigan and from the governor, they get to see what we're doing here at the club on a regular basis. But we're in Ingham County, and they just put a restriction on Ingham County that we must take everyone's temperature as they come to work. If anybody has left the state in the last 14 days, they're supposed to self-quarantine for 14 days. So if I were to travel to Indiana, I would have to self-quarantine for 14 days. They basically have us all on lockdown in Ingham County, and we're seeing more and more counties add specialties to special nuances to their restrictions on top of what the governor's already stated or what the president has stated. So with that, I'll sign off and let John chime in. I know he's had some calls this morning as well and probably has some more updates to give you.
Yeah, thanks, John. I'll give you, as John said, I'll give you kind of the national perspective. We start our day every day with a exec call, which, as John said, Seth and Jeff Price are working diligently on, tournaments and sponsors and what people are thinking. To add to John's comment, it's really interesting to me how the entire sports world has to come together. Because if you think about it, whatever's going to happen in summer and fall, it's compressed schedule, and TV and sponsors all play. You think the French Open or the Wimbledon or the Open Championship, a race for Dubai, NASCAR. Soccer over there, or football over there. How it all plays in is pretty amazing. And so not only is it complicated on the golf front, but it's complicated on the sports front. And they're making a lot of progress, kind of working around the Olympics. And then when the Olympics last week announced their change, it opened up dates, and then events started to move around. And so the schedule changed again. They were hoping to have, some announcement of what it might look like with fans or without fans, this week. I don't know if that's realistic or not. So it's just a really complicated process. You throw in insurance and sponsors and everything. And then it's not just us. It's all the entities. So as John said, I'm sitting on a daily call as well with the allies. And that's the Golf Course Superintendents Association, the National Golf Course Owners Association, We Are Golf, the USGA, and the CMAA. And through Friday, as John said, the biggest thing that we're working through is there are 38 states with orders, with stay-at-home orders. And you would think that would be somewhat easy to keep up with. There were 6 states that added new orders on Friday: Montana, South Carolina, Vermont, Texas, Idaho, and Minnesota. And of those states, 4 of them have counties and cities doing basically their own mandate. And that could be closing golf courses completely. It could be closing golf courses just to maintenance only, or it could be we want the golf courses to remain open in a park, as it relates to parks. So the reality is that especially since New York's latest announcement and Connecticut's latest announcement, that it's really, really localized now. Local health officials and municipality mayors are making the calls. So it's important for you all in your cities, especially the ones that work directly with the local authorities, to know what they're thinking, what city council people are thinking, what the mayor's thinking, and do what's right for your particular local area. I mean, we still have some counties that don't have any outbreaks, and then you also have counties that are turning into hotbeds. So as the president has said, he's pushed the decision out to the governors, and the governors have kind of pushed it to the mayors. So we will give you guidance, and we have a lot of information on PGA.org. If you haven't been on there in the last, I would say if you haven't been on there in the last 2 weeks, you should get on there. I would say you can pretty much find everything there that you need right now. And I know Craig is probably, and Tony are probably going to talk about this. This stuff's a little later, but this stuff's happening in real time. We've got information on PGA.org on the Families First Corona Act. We're working on trying to do a webinar tomorrow. Sorry, we're going to try to have a vendor tomorrow, but sometime this week do something on the SBA loans and the stimulus package. And again, for those of you, not to bore you all, but the legislatures are all gone for 3 weeks. And I know one of the things that our lobbyists will tell you is that, and this is way over my skis, but they're called NAICS codes. And golf is still in code 71, which is amusement parks and casinos. And, we need to start lobbying to be in code 72, which is the hospitality industry, which is where the SBA loans can start to be pushed out. So more on that. It's changing. We heard from some of our lobbyists that, the legislature's passed it, but if you went and talked to the legislatures, they're not even sure exactly how it's going to be actually carried out. So lots of unknown questions, but we're going to try to get the resources to you all. And I know Tom and Craig and Len are working specifically on the Northern California section, Southern California section, but nationally, we're going to try to push those resources out as well, just so that there's some place for you all to turn. We don't know all the answers. That's the important thing. I can't see the questions that are coming in because I actually dialed in on my phone. But if there's questions, I encourage all the questions, because if we don't get asked the questions, we're not going to be able to go find the answers. On the dues, just as John said, just in real time, we worked through the weekend on that. probably, you saw the second email. If you're a PGA member, we all got that second message today from Susie, kind of explaining a little bit more in depth on the dues situation. We're looking at the inurement study of 2001, if you can believe that, in real time, because back in 2001, our association changed some things with PAC status, and so there's this there's a actual legislation or something that is we're looking at right now. But the reality is we have a very difficult time, if not impossible time, due to our tax status and some of the ongoing changes with the association to reduce or cancel or even somewhat postpone dues. But we're turning over every rock right now to try and figure that out. And again, as John opened with, national dues are $100, and then there's $61 in other stuff to include liability insurance and some other things. So $161 is the national piece of this. We need, our big focus now is to make sure that we keep our sections viable. We keep our sections, doing what they need to do to stay positioned to lead, our sport out of this as soon as possible. There's varying information on when the peak is going to be, when the curve is going to flatten. I'm not going to bore you with, that. You should look at it. Hopeful that it's, this summer we're back to somewhat of normalcy, but who knows? That will depend on, as a lot of people said, people behaving correctly. So, again, I can't see the question. So once Tony and Craig get done talking, if there's any specific questions to me, Tom, someone can ask them to me, and I'll do the best I can to answer them. You all on the phone, you have my email. You can email me directly. It's hard to get me on the phone because I'm on the phone all day, but you can text me and I'll do the best I can individually for you as well. So we're trying to get everything answered. And as John said, we don't know all the answers, but we're working on your behalf really hard. So that's all I have.
Yeah, thanks, John. And Bryce said we have about 15 questions, but they've not popped up on my screen. Len, I don't know if they've popped up on yours, but they're not on mine. So Bryce, is there any related that you can relay to us for Mr. Easterbrook at this point? If you can hear me, Bryce. Okay, let's go ahead. I don't know if Tony Rice has come on the call yet. Tony, you here yet? Tony Rice?
I am, Tom. I'm here.
Okay, very good. We know you're in a time crunch right now, so if you wouldn't mind sharing a few words and what's going on with us, and we have about 250 on the call, so there's a lot of interested parties out there.
Okay, I appreciate it. Good morning, everybody. I'll try to be brief. I can't stay on too long just for my own schedule, but I'm going to try to stay on as long as I can to give a little bit of a kind of government affairs update and answer any questions all of you might have. So I'll keep my comments, try to be relatively brief anyways. But my name is Tony Rice. For those folks that I haven't been on a call yet, I'm a government consultant, lobbyist in Sacramento, primarily specialized in California related matters. I work with the California Alliance for Golf to participate in these calls recently to just kind of give a global sense, 30,000 foot level, kind of what's happening here in California, as well as kind of drill down on some specifics here. And then I don't do federal lobbying, but I've been tracking a little bit so I can kind of muddle my way through, but I know Craig and others have their hands and minds more on the pulse of that, but I can kind of touch on that a little bit. So here in California, we're obviously dealing with a lot of the things that every other state is dealing with for the most part, particularly the more populous areas. It kind of comes down to two different directives, so to speak. One is the governor has kind of put out here in California a baseline of essential versus non-essential services, but then has left a lot of the interpretation up to local governments to kind of decipher how they want to go above and beyond or not. And so, and then you also have the complication that there are some counties who are doing a lot of stringent matters as it relates to golf, and then others, and they're not taking necessarily any different interpretation of the language, meaning that the language is the language for the moratoriums, but public health officers are taking different approaches. And so we have kind of a hodgepodge of areas around the state as to what they can and can't do as it relates to golf. Northern California seems to be a little bit more open-minded for golf, so long as social distancing measures are taken into account in Southern California. But as of right now, for the most part, golf continues to be with every other industry and being kind of hit and hammered as that we have to close down for the most parts. And so then the question becomes, A, how do we navigate this? And B, what kind of relief is out there? So for the short term, over the weekend, I'm sure you all are aware that the president extended his 15-day social distancing guidelines by almost another 15 days, so for the entire month of April. But much like the governors have taken kind of a baseline approach, states can go above and beyond that should they deem that appropriate. I fully expect California to go above and beyond. The governor has said so. He does almost as many press conferences as the president does, and kind of giving a running update as to the status in his mind as to where California is. State of 40 million people, trying to really diminish the spread. So even if the president says, hey, at the end of April, everything's all clear from my perspective, states can and probably will take a different approach. So for those courses in those states that have been impacted, I see this going on. And so then it's a matter of what kind of relief can you access. So workers, there's the $2.2 trillion stimulus package on the federal level. California has kicked in some additional opportunities for workers, meaning here in California, I don't know how it works in every state, but there was typically has been a week abeyance period before anyone could file for unemployment insurance. That has been lifted, so anyone can access UI immediately. But as you can well imagine, unemployment applications have gone through the roof. So there's a delay just on the natural for the processing, but money is available there. There will be one-time payments for individual workers, both on the federal level, and then consideration will be done at the state levels as they do their budgets and move forward for their fiscal year. So there's going to be kind of a piecemeal approach to helping individuals. For golf courses, I know it's been mentioned, there are various pots of monies in the stimulus package that will relate to SBA loans. And some will be exclusionary. Some of those pots will be exclusionary. Some of those will be inclusionary in terms of what various avenues can be accessed. I know that's being drilled down. I would defer to Craig and his compadre Kevin down there. I know they're working closely with some other organizations. I'll let him take the lead as to the most recent analysis, because again, that's really not my expertise. I kind of more follow California. So that unfortunately sets the table of we're going to be in this for a little bit longer, depending on where you are around the country. It'll be longer than others. For instance, I fully expect California to be dealing differently than Montana. So it's just a matter of where your courses are, how many employees obviously you have, and that matters if you're considered a big business or a small business. By definition, a small business is 50 employees or less. Anything above that would fall into a different category of relief. So again, I'll defer Craig because that's more of a result of the federal stimulus, but each state is looking at trying to do something to protect their industry. I saw, I believe it was about a week ago, there was an analysis done by one of the major financial entities. They did a survey of 10,000 of their small businesses, and I believe it was 52% suggested that they would not be able to survive, meaning they would not be able to reopen their doors if this went on for more than a couple of months. And so that obviously has a lot of implications for the states and federal government to try to do something, push revenue out there to prop people up for as long as they possibly can until we can get through this virus crisis. So I'll stop there. I could go on for another 30 minutes, but I won't bore you. So I'll stop here, open myself up to any questions if there are any.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. And I found a couple of them. My screen isn't working, but Bryce texted me a couple of the questions, and I know that you may have answered a couple of the questions from your remarks. But can you, or do you have the information, you or Craig or Kevin, in regards to independent contractors filing? I know they would have had to file an income tax filing the previous year, but any other information regarding independent contractors, which is the new rule for the listening audience?
Yeah, so
go ahead.
Yeah, so just real fast on that. I have seen a belief that there is a pot of funding, and I think Craig, the reason he was jumping in, probably has more specific information. I would be open to hearing that as well, because I'm an independent contractor. But in terms of relief of every employee that's out there, whether you're an independent contractor or not, if you filed a tax return in the last 2 years, it doesn't even have to be 19. They will go off of your 2018 tax return. You are eligible as an adult. If you make less than $75,000 per year, you can get up to $1,200, and then it actually steps down from there. Between $75,000 to $100,000, you get X amount of money, and I'm not sure how low it goes. I haven't seen that, but anything, if you make above $100,000 a year, you do not qualify for that $1,200. Above and beyond that, if you've claimed in the last 2 years the dependent child, you can get, I believe it's $500 per child. So they estimate that a family of 4 combined income somewhere around $3,000 a family of 4 could get if you have, husband, wife, or co-parenting household with two dependent children. If there's a pot of funding independent of that, much like an SBA loan for an independent contractor, I'd be all ears. I don't know, Craig, if you have information on that.
Yeah. The federal bill spoke generically in terms of making this particular tranche of largesse available to independent contractors. Unemployment insurance is, the standard is set by the federal government, but it's administered through the states. So in California, it would appear, although it's not necessarily definitive, and I think that is something to remember about all of these discussions, nothing seems to be definitive. One needs to have been an independent contractor under California law, under Dynamex, and more specifically Assembly Bill 5. So if you have filed, if you have paid into disability and into unemployment under those rules, you are certainly eligible not only for unemployment under this federal bill, but you're eligible for the accelerated amounts that are covered therein. It would appear that if you have not done that, or if you were not employed directly any time in the last 18 months, you may not be eligible. Now, the California legislature is free to intervene on an emergency basis, or perhaps that falls under the emergency powers of the governor. I don't know. That's really above my pay grade, because there's so little expertise on exactly what constitutes the emergency powers, because they're invoked so rarely, and certainly never invoked on this kind of mass statewide basis, generally where there's a flood or an earthquake or fires or some kind of natural disaster. That's why we're in a little bit of uncharted waters here. But that's my best understanding. So if you were in the state of Arkansas, for example, there would be definite clarity here, because Arkansas does not have a Dynamex decision or an AB 5. I hope that clarified the issue more than confused it.
Craig and Tony, do you think that as this week goes on and we look to Friday to having more clear answers that will have a more clear, not to say yours isn't, forgive me, but that will have a more clear response?
Well, there are two different issues here. There are state issues and there are federal issues. And I'm going to tag on to something that John Easterbrook spoke of, that we are all expecting through the World Golf Foundation's We Are Golf effort, that in Washington, D.C., they're preparing really good analysis of the federal stimulus bill or the relief package that went through. And I'm hopeful that by the time you get to this Friday call, there'll be some definitive information. I also hope there'll be some definitive information available at the California Alliance for Golf, which has a board meeting this Wednesday morning. With respect to the independent contractors issues, that is a federal issue, yes, and we'll have clarity on that. In fact, we think we do have clarity on that specific point already. But we won't necessarily, in fact, I guarantee you we will not have clarity on what that means in California for specifically for unemployment insurance applications, because the legislature is out of session. They're on holiday at the particular point, and I'm not sure whether or not, although there's been a lot of suggestions that AB 5 be set aside, I'm not sure that under the most liberal interpretation of the governor's emergency powers that he can abrogate legislation. So I want to emphasize. And when if the call turns to me, I was going to distinguish between those issues which are federal and those issues which are state. With the federal issues being important in this case because the federal government has released $2.2 trillion. The number is stunning to me. But again, everything here is administered through states, and in this state, the public health is administered through counties, not through cities. Although certain cities in the state, La Quinta comes to mind, have issued orders and edicts as if they did have that power, but it's not clear that they actually have it.
Okay, thank you. Here's another question, and John Easterbrook, this probably applies to you, and we may not have the full information yet in this regard for stated previously. Is the PGA Credit Union going to be involved with the Paycheck Protection Program loans to help cover payroll for small businesses?
Well, I think there are two different issues there. Small business loans, as it relates to the stimulus, my answer would probably be no. The actual PGA Credit Union, I can ask that question and we can get you that answer for Friday as it relates to their small business loans.
Okay, there's also a pretty simple questionnaire that's out there as well that is available through SBA.gov. I believe it's .gov. Correct me if I'm wrong. That can get many of your questions answered as well. And then I do know that the section, we're a 501c3, and we're certainly looking into it because C3s, from what we know, are eligible. And so, but again, that's through various and designated banks out there. So, okay. Craig and Kevin, go right ahead, please. We have a few minutes. We have about 15 minutes left of this hour, just so all 250 or so of you know that.
Okay, what I think I'll do in the interest of time is not repeat anything at the federal level that John said or anything at the state level that Tony said, but simply complement with some of the things I think that would add to their presentations and maybe complete the circles here. So as I alluded to a moment ago, I think we're all waiting for the combined efforts of the World Golf Foundation to come up with some very definitive as definitive as possible under the circumstances, analysis sometime this week, mid or late week, of exactly what we think is in the federal stimulus bill. There are a lot of open questions, such as there are two different definitions. There's the standard definition that Tony just referred to, the legal term of art. A small business is generally under 50, and for certain purposes, particularly for the applicability of forgiveness loans, that would seem to qualify. Then there's another standard of under 500. With respect to whether golf facilities themselves are amenable to this federal largesse, what John was referring to was one piece of good news: golf is not categorically excluded, as it has been from some of these relief bills in the past, the most famous one being Hurricane Katrina. On the other hand, golf is in the Title 71 category of those entities that are eligible instead of 72, which would be hospitality. That is about a 10-year effort, as I understand it, of the World Golf Foundation to lobby something. Sadly, many weeks ago, prior to this particular COVID-19 crisis, that was going to be the number one, number two, number three focus of the lobbying effort with great specificity. Obviously, that's been put aside to respond to an emergency. And I think if there's a lesson in there, as there's a lesson in a lot of things we're discovering, but this is our specific lesson in terms of political lobbying, sometimes it behooves one to think in terms of long periods of time, 5 and 10 and 15 and 20 years out. With respect to the state of California, keep in mind, and it's not unusual, there was a vice president of the United States who came to Los Angeles many years ago and went to City Hall to talk about federal programs, and was sent up the block to the County Hall of Administration because he did not understand something that most don't understand. So I'll clarify at this point. The governor sets minimum standards, but does have emergency orders. In California, most state services and virtually all federal services are administered at the county level, which under the California Constitution are technically are organs of the state, unlike cities, which can be general law cities or charter cities. And so public health and all those public hospitals you see are administered by counties, and all of the orders, which in most cases, particularly to the degree to which a county is urbanized, far exceed the minimum standards that have been set by our governor. They are issued by counties. And as I explained a moment ago, in terms of La Quinta and some other cities, have issued things which are interesting, but probably don't have enforcement value. But I think it's meant to get the attention. And I'm thinking of La Quinta because before the county of Riverside clarified things about a ban on golf, the city of La Quinta got serious and issued its own separate one. Again, not clear to me, above my pay grade, as to whether that was particularly dispositive. But I wanted to give a little bit of that sort of organizational view, because implicit or almost explicit in all these questions, it strikes me, is there's a great deal of confusion about how exactly how our system of government, with its various levels and checks and balances and its federated structure, even within the states, operates. So something Tony referred to, I'm going to reiterate. I said I wasn't going to, in the interest of time, I wouldn't do that, but I think it's so important to understand that for the most part, this governor, laudably in my opinion, as it goes to issues that are long going to endure, particularly with respect to water after the COVID-19 crisis passes, has determined, unlike his predecessor, to issue a set of minimum standards which apply to all of California, but recognizing that one size does not fit all, and particularly in a pandemic, has encouraged local counties to far exceed those things. Where we stand now, I'm hopeful that as we begin another week of this mess, that we realize that we've pivoted past the sense that that everyone on this call understands that golf is part of those activities, much like walking alone on a trail, two people playing tennis on a court, or where I'm sitting in Los Angeles County right now, where all the beaches are not just closed, they're literally guarded so you can't get on them. The access to all hiking trails blocked. playground equipment has yellow tape around it, indicating that you can't step on the other side of those yellow tapes. So yes, to all of those who are still lamenting the fact that golf, particularly at a private club level, can easily be played practicing social distancing. And I would add that that is exactly the way, at least I can speak definitively about the Southern California counties that own golf courses operated subsequent to the issuance of their own very strict orders. They opened their golf courses, they opened their beaches, they opened their not their rec centers, but they opened their general parks, and they opened a whole host of things. And on paper, and when we get back to ramping up, because at some point the pandemic wave is going to crest and it's going to start ebbing, and we're going to start coming slowly. There isn't going to be an all clear signal as there might be after a hurricane or an earthquake or a set of tornadoes blowing through town. But we're going to gradually begin to slowly come back to normal order. I believe golf has positioned itself in California to be among those first activities that comes back on board, but it will be incumbent upon all of us to do a much better job than we did the last time. And we're not alone. That's not critical of the golf industry, but all those outdoor activities, which are in unison lamenting that they can be practiced safely, it just didn't work out that way, particularly as you get into cities. And as persons were working from home, or in many cases not working, they wanted to congregate in these outdoor places. So I want to emphasize to everyone on this call that yes, there is golf going on today. Sacramento seems to be the loosest county in the state in this regard. Yolo County is a bit mixed. And there are still pockets in places where there are some private clubs behind gates that are very hidden from views. And if members who live on the facilities are going to take their golf clubs and play a few holes, no one is going to see it. Nobody is going to enforce it. Yes, that's going to go forward. But let's try to avoid the temptation to use those examples that Club A over here or some specific spot in one particular county, which is a little bit looser, to begin to keep ourselves mired in the sense that we are going to overturn for golf what hiking and simply all the other outdoor recreational activities have not been able to overturn, and focus all of our efforts not on yesterday but on tomorrow, because I think there's a great deal for the golf industry, and this is just crudely financial analysis I'm giving right now, on the other side of the pandemic curve than there is on where we are now. That's sort of a desperate attempt to hang on to something which you're going to lose anyway. If past is prologue, and admittedly it's the very recent past, everywhere that it's been tried, it ends up not working. So, and to the degree to which we advertise for the world, particularly if it's in a picture in a newspaper or on the 6 o'clock news, or there's a report of a sheriff's office or a police department coming off to clear a golf course, that will harm the industry's ability to be indeed among those early activities on the other side of the pandemic curve that come back in. And I thought that might have been the most important thing for me to convey in this particular conversation, because, and that's based upon the nature of the consistent flow of emails I get, is the sense that somehow a lot of individuals, some facilities don't believe, whether it's the PGA sections, whether it's the NCGA or the SCGA or the golf course owners or any of us. I want to reassure you, yes, we understand that argument. We have made that argument. I think we won that argument, but let's not lose it on the other side of the pandemic curve because somehow there's a sense sitting in an isolated spot that we're not on top of that ball, or that we are going to sit by idly and simply not do our best to see as many golf courses and golf facilities and as many employment opportunities remain when we get on the other side of the pandemic curve than on this side where we're still descending into, we don't know where the bottom of this particular abyss is, but we'll know it when we come back onto the other side. And whether it's sooner than later or later than sooner is not really no one really knows. Only that virus knows, and the degree to which you look at some mapping right now, there's been some suggestion that one of the reasons, if you look at a map of California, our cities are doing better than many that have been affected later, and certainly better than the city of New York, which is fast becoming a disaster area. Whether that can be attributed to the fact that we went to some lockdowns earlier, particularly in the Bay Area, but also statewide. Our stay-at-home were among the first ones, or whether it's just dumb luck, I have no idea. Eventually, epidemiologists and academics and people who do that sort of thing for a living will, in the rearview mirror, study all of this and will maybe learn some lessons. But for right now, again, I'll yield the floor. I probably didn't answer some of those definitive questions. When it comes to construing a 1,000-page bill that also is in uncharted waters and how it may apply to our federated system, I would harken back to I think the wise words of both Johns, Easterbrook and Lindert, at the beginning, saying this is an incredibly fluid situation that's changing every moment. But there is a definite consistency or trajectory to those changes. We're locking down more and more and more and more. And I just want to, my last comment, Tom and Len, will be, let us focus on what we have some measure of control over, and that is how we emerge from this as best we can, understanding that what we're talking about is the best possible outcome in a situation whose outcome, if you told all of us 10 weeks ago that we would be looking at this, our daubers would really be down. So let's look forward and try not to look back and do the best we can. Thanks for the time to share this particular message with all of our professional colleagues, North and South.
Yeah, Craig, thanks. And just learned that the city of Oceanside, which has been one of the last areas, cities or counties that have kept golf going, beginning tomorrow, is shutting down their city golf courses as well, and those golf courses located within the city limits. And your comments about the future are right on. So we did have a couple of others, and very briefly here and quickly, the 50 limit, the 50 regarding the unemployment, or the SBA, I'm sorry. It's my understanding, and please help, that would be full-time equivalents from those of you who have studied it. Is that correct?
This is John Easterbrook. That came up on our call this morning, and there's as Craig just said, there's a difference of opinion on that.
Okay.
And so hopefully that's one of the things we can get answered tomorrow or Wednesday. That because if it's not, as most golf courses would be, 50 if you included part-time is, going to be not very many of us, unfortunately, when you throw in maintenance and everything else.
Thank you. Any other questions or any other comments from John or Craig for the good of the group?
Yeah, Tom, I'm going to have one comment for, again, as someone whose full-time job is advocacy on behalf of the industry. If any folks on this call may have felt in the past that whether golf was in Title 71 or 72 or some arcane tax code somewhere, that somehow this was frivolity or didn't make any difference, think again at the difference it may make as similarly situated businesses get forgivable loans or all kinds of federal largesse, and the golf facilities may en masse not necessarily be included as a result of that. And so the next time someone suggests that the industry ought to put a great deal of focus on something as seemingly arcane and frivolous and esoteric and difficult to understand as to whether you're in Chapter 71 of the IRS code or Chapter 72 of the IRS code, it may end up in some cases, I hope not, being the difference between a golf facility open after this and a golf facility closed after that.
Before we sign off, and we have Kevin Fitzgerald on the line too, and we haven't heard a lot from Kevin. A couple things in the background. Kevin, do you have any matters that you would like to report?
Well, I think the only thing I might sort of reiterate is that we've talked about several different aspects here today, and maybe just for a final point of clarity, we hope, as you've heard, to have more for you later in the week about the CARES Act financial assistance, particularly for small businesses. The idea about the individual rebate, that is separate. So you heard a little bit, I think, from Tony about this up to $1,200 per individual up to a certain income level. That is separate from unemployment. So regardless of the other issues we've talked about, whether you're an independent contractor, whether you are just a worker, whether you are in a category where you're now looking for unemployment insurance help, the individual rebate does apply to everyone. And hopefully we'll have more information later in the week. But just to clear that up, that's separate and applies to everyone, not just the unemployment.
Yeah, thanks. And are those rebates and the additional UI unemployment insurance benefit, those are all tax-free? Is that correct? You won't pay income tax on.
I don't think that's the case, but I am not clear on that at this point either. There are a lot of question marks, but I don't think that's the case.
Okay. Yeah, we'll follow up on that later in the week as well. So, well, we appreciate everything from everyone.
Hey, Tom.
Yes,
I just want to add something just based upon, I think it's very, very important that, I mean, there's 300 plus on this call, is that there is a lot of misinformation out there. And again, I just if you don't know, don't say, and pass it along. And like Tom said, Craig and Tony and the gang, everybody's working in California on your behalf. We'll do the best we can nationally. Just make sure that, it's just really complicated. So make sure that you're using your resources well, and you personally are reading up on this stuff.
Yeah, thanks, John. That's really important. And another reminder, recommendation is go to pga.org, go to ncpga.com, go to scpga.com, and click on the COVID-19 links or any other link related. And the most up-to-date information that we have will be posted on those websites. And we're reviewing those every day. We're looking at those every day. We're adding every day. So would encourage you to do so. And thanks to Craig and Kevin and the two Johns and Tony for your continued involvement and interest for all of our PGA golf professionals. We have another California PGA chat scheduled for Friday at noon. So there's another opportunity. We'll know, as everyone has said, we'll know much more, we hope, at that time, whether it be from the consultants at the World Golf Foundation or individual consultants that we might be talking with, whether it be from Tony, from Craig. And so we encourage you to share with us again on Friday. If anybody has any questions at all, go to the websites. Feel free to call me. My mobile number is listed on the website, scpga.com. I just ask you to text me first to make sure that I'm around and awake, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. I'm sorry, I put the wrong time on Friday. It's 10 a.m. on Friday for the joint call. Those of you who signed up, you will receive your MSR credit, and the same thing on Friday. And again, we encourage you to join us. Again, thanks to everybody on the call, and let us know if you need anything, please. We're here to work with you and to help you. PGA of America, Southern Cal PGA, Northern Cal PGA, and any other section that is on this call. So thank you again for joining us, and hopefully we'll see many of you or talk with many of you on Friday. Thank you very much. Len, do you have anything before we go?
Thank you, Tom. And to our speakers and the staff that put all this together so quickly after the stimulus package was passed on Friday. So for spending your time over the weekend to prepare us for today. And so I think the comments reflect how complex this is. And Tom said something very important. We are adding links to both our websites in real time. We've updated about 3 or 4 more today with Families First, FAQs on the stimulus payments, and a link to the EDD, the Employment Development Department here in California regarding unemployment. We'll spend the rest of the week learning more as we do this together. So please, as has been mentioned, scpga.com, ncpgalinks.com. We also have links to pga.org. This communication is our strongest weapon right now as we work not only on our personal health, but also on our business health and those that are nearest and dearest to us. So on behalf and thanks to our partners that are on the call, our industry partners and all our colleagues and friends, we will get through this. We'll get through this together. And as Tom mentioned, please join us again at 10 o'clock on Friday.
Yeah, thanks, Len, and thanks again to Bryce and Caitlin and Tyler for administering this call and helping us put this together. And we'll see you Friday. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom and Len.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, gang.
Thanks, everyone.